Ja, vi vil have et kvarters tid til spørgsmål. Så det er bare om at række hånden op, så kan man have faren med mikrofonen. Ja, det var passende til det.
Thank you for a very inspiring lecture. I wonder if you answer the question, what is our mission, and would it be able to phrase what you suggest to us in terms of it's a matter of faithfulness rather than effect or goals, so that we should not so much look for how can we in our mission try to contribute to more people or as many people as possible coming to faith and being saved eternally. And instead of that, we should ask how do we be faithful to the holistic character of God's mission, and then we must live up to God, who is being saved just now.
Yes, I see what's behind your question, and there is a sense in which I would want to answer yes. I think we are called to faithfulness in whatever area of life God has put us. I wouldn't want to make it an either or. I don't think that we should be unconcerned about effectiveness and fruitfulness, because clearly the Bible shows that God does want people to come to know Christ, and that it is scandalous that there are so many thousands of people, millions of people in the world still today who have not heard of Jesus Christ, who have not had the opportunity to put their faith in him. So I would still want to say yes, that needs to remain a spur and a concern and a motivation. But one of the problems is that if that becomes the only focus of mission, then people who think of themselves as, quote, ordinary Christians, who are just working in everyday jobs in the community, can sometimes feel disabled, disenfranchised. They're not really being part of the mission because they're not engaged in reaching the unreached and so on. And what I would want to say is that we need to, towards the end of my talk, we need to recognize that the whole of life as a Christian has to be lived for God's purpose in creation. And I believe strongly, therefore, that work matters, that society matters, that God is concerned about industry and wealth and healing and medicine and education. All those areas are not just marginal things, they actually matter to God. And to be serving with my life in community by doing good things, by being part of the community, I am doing God's work as well. I think that's there in the Bible from people like Daniel and Joseph and Erastus and Lydia and others, that we should not diminish the importance of work. So in that sense, to come back to your question, for Christians to be faithful doers of what God has gifted and enabled them to do in the world is important and should be regarded as missionally significant. So that's why we should pray for and encourage the people of our congregation who are, quote, in ordinary secular jobs, and not only pray for those who are in, quote, Christian jobs as ministers and missionaries. Thanks, Andy. Another question at the back, I think.
So, thank you for your teaching, and especially in the book. It's wonderful, like chocolate. So we're supposed to care for the whole of creation. But when you look at the ministry of Jesus, whom we're supposed to imitate, you seldom find that he does anything. When you look at it, it's almost like he more condemns the creation, like the tree that he cursed, or when he sends the demons into the pigs and they drown. But you never see him bless crops or bless animals or even save animals. So I understand your teaching, but it's kind of difficult when the church members ask you, so where do we see that in the life of Jesus?
Yeah, thank you. That is a good question, and it is challenging. I would say a number of things. First of all, part of the answer may be that the problem in the 1st century AD was not anything like what we now see in terms of the destruction of creation that has happened within the last couple of hundred years. partly as a result of the Industrial Revolution and the effects of that in the world, and of course the growth of world population and issues of climate change and species destruction and so on. Jesus and the apostles were living in a very different world where those things were not as yet problems. I would say my second thing would be that Jesus is certainly aware of the natural creation and blesses it in a variety of ways. I mean, he speaks, for example, about the birds that the Father feeds, the flowers of the field that the Father makes beautiful, and so on. He even says that amazing phrase that not even a bird, not even a sparrow falls from heaven without your heavenly Father. And we often add knowing, but Jesus says without your heavenly Father, that God actually is involved even in the natural processes of a bird dying. I think the things like the demonic thing of the pigs, the Gadarene pigs, and the fig tree can be interpreted in ways that don't mean that Jesus was indifferent to creation. Those have other theological meaning. When he ate, he would always have blessed the food that he ate. He would have always have given thanks, as he did, and indeed in the Passover he blessed and gave thanks before he ate it. So there are creational elements of the teaching of Jesus. And my final point would be that I want to take my theology of mission and mission practice from the whole of the biblical revelation, and not simply from either only the example of Jesus or only the example of the Apostle Paul. Because then there will be all sorts of things that we do in mission which would have no justification. I mean, Jesus didn't start hospitals either, nor did the apostles, as far as we know, found schools or teach people to read. I mean, but we recognize these as intrinsic parts of what it is to be human, to have human dignity, to empower and bless people, to do good things, without needing there to be an actual example of Jesus doing this or the Apostle Paul doing this. It's a slightly simplistic argument to say we shouldn't get bothered about creation because we don't see Jesus or Paul doing it. There'll be lots of other things we would have to stop doing if that were the case.
People at a job, they meet people there. And they take people at a job.
Yeah.
They meet them there, they can do a mission. But how do we actuate the people that are out of the job? Many people are out of that nowadays. How do we make them serve and keep and do their mission work? Because all of a sudden, the background they had is not there. They're going to get into a new background.
Thank you. Yes, that's a good question. It encourages me to make the point that I wouldn't want us to simply equate work with employment or with paid employment. Of course, normally the normal situation is that we work in a way which enables us to earn money and therefore to contribute to society and to work and provide for ourselves and our families by employment, paid work. And that's true. But of course there's also, even in an economy where there isn't a great deal of unemployment, there are ways in which people work which is not necessarily employed. I mean, mothers work usually without getting paid for it. And there's all kinds of voluntary work that even employed people do, which is also work, though not paid for. Where you have a situation where people have become unemployed in the economy, then I think, yes, we have a lot of thinking to do, first of all, as to whether there are aspects of our economic system which need to be questioned and challenged if they are creating unemployment. And that's a deeper theological, philosophical and political argument which Christians need to engage in. And then I think we need to encourage both Christians who are unemployed and non-Christians who are unemployed to see that human life is more than just employment. There are also ways of serving and contributing to society and community which can be done even if they're not paid. That we don't have to feel useless. Now that may take some creativity, it may take some imagination, but I think we ought to try to help people to realize that you don't stop being a human being and you don't stop being a valuable human being when you lose your job. The fact that so many people do feel that is partly good and partly bad. It's partly because work is intrinsic to being human. I mean, we want to work. We were created to work. Work is of the essence of being the image of God. That's the good side. The bad side is that work very easily becomes an idol because we are what we do. You know, the first thing you ask somebody at a party is, so what do you do? We take our identity from our jobs and our paycheck and our social status also from our work. And work can therefore easily become a source of our identity and our value. And when it becomes that, then it's idolatrous. And that's why when we lose that, we suddenly feel, I'm nobody. I don't have any value anymore because I've lost my work. Well, that's because you place more value on your work than you should have. And I think all of us, even as Christians, should ask that question. I mean, I sometimes ask it of myself because I have friends who have had significant Christian ministry who either out of illness or paralysis or something else have lost that ministry. And you then wonder, what does that do to your sense of esteem and your relationship with God? And so I sometimes say to myself, just imagine if I were to have some paralyzing disease, say, I don't know, cancer of the throat or something that stopped me ever being able to preach or teach again. Or something that prevented, you know, blindness, or, you know, that enabled me never to write again. What would that do to my sense of self-worth and value? Would I still know myself to be a child of God, loved by God, a human being that has value in the world, even if I couldn't do stuff that I think I'm moderately good at doing? Even as Christians, we need not to place all our self-worth and value in what we do. So therefore, to help people who are out of work in that sense, out of a job, unemployed, to come back into a sense of humanness and contributing to God's mission, I think can be a very important task, pastoral task to do.
I think we will make an end here. Thank you very much, Chris Wright, for these two inspiring, balanced, and lectures showing the biblical theology of mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.